Are you familiar with that strange cold pressure? You're sitting in a work meeting or reading a comment thread online. You are absolutely certain you are right. You have the facts, ironclad logic, personal experience, but then one person expresses a contrary opinion, then a second, a third, and you can physically feel your confidence, like metal under a press, begin to warp. Your mouth goes dry. You no longer argue as fiercely. You start to doubt your own thoughts. Your inner voice, which just moments ago was screaming, "I'm right," now drops to a panicked whisper. What if I'm the one who doesn't understand? This is that subtle pressure, first described in Solomon Ash's experiments. It forces us to back down, even when we know we are correct. We are accustomed to believing that the collective mind is a creative force, that together we are smarter, stronger, and more just than we are alone. But this is a dangerous, deadly illusion. Consider this. Why can a gathering of hundreds of educated, civilized, peaceful people, engineers, doctors, teachers, degenerate in a matter of hours into an irrational, cruel mob, ready to lynch someone to approving roars? Where does their intellect vanish? Where does their moral compass dissolve? Logic suggests that a collective mind of geniuses should produce a supergenius. But reality proves again and again the horrifying truth of Gustave Le Bon's observation. The intelligence of a crowd always descends to the level of its most primitive member. This is the central, unsettling paradox of human society. There is an operating code that governs this transformation. Invisible laws that activate the moment we become part of a group. Over a century ago, in 1895, the French sociologist Gustave Le Bon cracked this code when he published his prophetic work, The Psychology of Crowds. By the end of this account, you will know the 6 fundamental laws he discovered, and you will understand how they cause you to lose your will and reason in any crowd, from a riot in a city square to your office chat group. Consider this an operating manual for the most dangerous creature on the planet, the collective mind. Picture Paris at the end of the 18th century. The air is thick and electrified, smelling of gunpowder and fear. The streets don't yet hold a crowd. They hold individuals. Here is a baker who can physically feel his family's stomachs clench with hunger. Here is a soldier, his hands trembling with doubt about the orders he must follow. And here is an aristocrat, wrinkling his nose in disgust at the stench of the rabble, not realizing his world is collapsing. Each has their own will, their own thoughts, their own sharp personal pain. But then they gather in the square, first dozens, then hundreds. At some imperceptible moment, an alchemical reaction occurs. Their individual voices merge into a single low-frequency hum. Their small personal fears crystallize into one shared blind fury. They are no longer a baker, a soldier, an aristocrat. They are a single pulsating organism. They are the crowd. This is Le Bon's first law, the law of the mental unity of crowds. It states that once a certain number of people gather, their individual consciousnesses are not merely suppressed. They disappear. Completely. Like drops of water hitting scorching oil. In their place, a new psychological entity is born, a collective soul. This soul is not the simple sum of its members' minds. No, it is an entirely new being with its own primitive laws. It is like a swarm of insects, acting as a single hive mind. It doesn't think like a person. It vibrates, it feels, it craves. And here is the shocking detail, the central paradox that Le Bon uncovered. This new superorganism is always, without a single exception, intellectually inferior to any single individual composing it. Remember that. You could assemble a crowd of Nobel laureates, and their collective mind would operate at the level of a primitive tribe ready to burn a witch. Why does this happen? Because the collective soul doesn't engage your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for logic and analysis. It hacks into your limbic system, your ancient reptilian brain. It operates not on facts but on instincts, vivid images, and emotions as simple as a punch. It is a giant and powerful child, but it is utterly irrational. This newborn organism is blind and deaf to the arguments of reason. It is impulsive, volatile, and cruel. Its mood can shift in a second from heroic self-sacrifice to a bloodbath. But what gives it the animalistic courage to act where any single individual would retreat in terror? Where does this monstrous, unshakable certainty in its own rightness come from, even as it commits evil? The answer lies in its greatest superpower, the sense of omnipotence granted by anonymity. And this is our second law. Imagine an ordinary person. Let's call him Mark. He's at home late at night. The blue light of the screen pulls his face from the darkness. He's scrolling his feed and sees a story about someone who made a mistake, said the wrong thing. The comments are already a boiling pot. Angry messages appear. 1, 10, 100. Mark physically feels a righteous anger welling up inside him, stoked by algorithms that show him only the most venomous content. He joins the chorus. His fingers strike the keyboard with force, typing harsh, cruel words he would never, under any circumstances, dare say to someone's face. He hits send, a short jolt of dopamine, and not a shred of guilt. Why? Because in that moment it's not him, Mark, condemning a person. It's us, the just internet community. It's the people restoring order. His personality, his doubts, his empathy, all have dissolved into the digital crowd. This is the second law in action, the disappearance of responsibility. Le Bon understood that in a crowd, you gain a sense of invincible, almost divine power. And it's granted by the simple awareness that there are many of you. This sheer number guarantees you anonymity. And anonymity completely disables personal responsibility. Imagine you have a fuse in your brain. It prevents you from committing antisocial acts. It constantly whispers, "What will people think?" And, "What if I get caught?" Anonymity in a crowd simply rips this fuse out by the roots. The moral brakes fail. The crowd is a perfect, impenetrable mask behind which you can do anything you would never dare to do alone. The effect is so powerful that Le Bon called it a key paradox. The most law-abiding and peaceful citizen, a person who would never cross the street on a red light, who gives up their seat on public transport, can participate with a roar of delight in acts of vandalism and monstrous violence. Not because they were secretly evil all along. No, it's because the anonymity of the group grants them an intoxicating illusion, like cheap wine, of absolute omnipotence and complete impunity. In that moment, they are no longer an individual with a unique history and conscience. They are a faceless cell in a giant collective organism, simply executing its will. This feeling of impunity, this flash of rage or wave of panic spreads instantly. It isn't transmitted through words or logic. It is contagious. Like a virus passed by a glance, a gesture, a shared rhythm of breathing, a signal through a giant neural network where each person is a node, ready to ignite. But how exactly does one emotion capture thousands of people in a matter of seconds? For this, the crowd has its own lethally effective communication mechanism, Le Bon's third law. Imagine a stock exchange trading floor a century ago. The air hums with tension. smelling of paper and sweat. Suddenly, in one corner of the room, a whisper spreads like a snake-like hiss. A major company is on the verge of bankruptcy. One trader, his face a mask of horror, begins to frantically sell his shares. His neighbor sees this. He doesn't know the details. He has no time to analyze market reports. He sees only one thing, pure animal fear in his colleague's wide eyes. And that fear infects him instantly, like a virus. He too starts selling. Within a minute, the entire floor is gripped by panic, the hum of voices turning into a roar. People are acting not on information, but on the emotion they caught from others. The market collapses. This is the third law, the mechanism of emotional contagion. Le Bon compared it to an epidemic. In a crowd, any emotion, any action becomes incredibly contagious. Modern neuroscience would explain this as the mass activation of mirror neurons. Your rational thinking, which could serve as an immune response to this psychological virus, is completely shut down. That is why fear, hatred, or euphoric delight spreads from person to person with lightning speed. You don't decide to feel what others feel. You simply begin to feel it. It happens at the level of instinct, bypassing all conscious control. Now let's jump to our time. What is your social media feed? It is the most perfect mechanism for emotional contagion ever created. Algorithms optimized for engagement purposefully find and show you posts that evoke strong, primitive emotions, anger, joy, outrage. They know that these emotions are as contagious as the plague. They are what make you like, comment, and share, spreading the virus further. Modern digital crowds operate on the same ancient principle, but amplified millions of times by technology. When you are infected with the emotion of a crowd, your mind becomes completely defenseless, like a fortress that has lowered all its bridges and thrown open its gates. Your critical thinking is paralyzed. You are ready to believe any idea, no matter how absurd, if it is delivered on the wave of a shared emotion. Le Bon compared this vulnerable, unguarded state of consciousness to a very precise and frightening phenomenon: hypnosis. Picture it. A vast square in the 20th century. A sea of heads. They stand shoulder to shoulder. You feel the warmth and pressure of the bodies next to you. From a high rostrum, an orator's voice booms, distorted and amplified by primitive loudspeakers. He isn't arguing. He isn't proving a point. He speaks in simple, chopped phrases, painting vivid, living images of enemies and friends. Now look at the faces in the crowd. Something is wrong. Their gazes are unfocused, their jaws slightly slack. They chant slogans automatically, in a single pulsing rhythm. They are in a trance. Their individuality is erased. They are a single entity, mesmerized by the leader's voice. This is the fourth law, hypnotic suggestibility. Once you enter a crowd and become infected by its emotion, you lose your personal will. You become like an automaton, a sleepwalker carrying out someone else's commands. Your conscious personality vanishes, and you completely submit to the will of whoever has managed to capture the crowd's imagination. You become capable of incredible heroism or monstrous cruelty, depending on the idea that is implanted in you. You no longer think. You no longer doubt. You execute. Le Bon compared a person in a crowd to a hypnotized subject, and the leader to the hypnotist. For him, this was not just a beautiful metaphor. He considered it a precise, almost clinical description of the process. A hypnotist paralyzes the conscious will of the subject and communicates directly with their unconscious. In the same way, a crowd's leader, Using images and emotional repetition bypasses the barriers of your critical thinking and gives commands directly to your instincts. Reason is asleep. The will is broken. The subject is ready for programming. In this state, a person is capable of anything. But how exactly does the hypnotist control his audience? How does he implant the desired ideas into the heads of thousands, turning them into an obedient weapon? It turns out he has three simple but incredibly powerful tools, the three pillars that support all propaganda and mass persuasion. The early 20th century, the bustling streets of New York. Tobacco giants have hit an invisible wall. Half the market, women, barely smokes. For them it is a vulgar masculine symbol, a stigma. How to break this taboo? They go to a man whose name will become synonymous with manipulation, Edward Bernays. He is Freud's nephew, and he knows you don't sell people cigarettes. You sell them an idea. So he stages a spectacle. The Easter Sunday parade on Fifth Avenue. On his unseen signal, a group of elegant suffragettes defiantly light up cigarettes. Journalists, whom Bernays invited in advance, ask, "What is this?" The answer is ready. These are torches of freedom. In an instant, a cigarette ceased to be tobacco. It became a symbol of emancipation, a challenge to the patriarchal world. Sales skyrocketed. Bernays didn't persuade with logic. He implanted a viral image in their minds that did all the work for him. What Bernays did was not a miracle. It was a cold, calculated technique that Le Bon described as the leader's triad. The first tool, assertion. This is the injection of an idea in its purest form. A short, emotionally charged slogan, devoid of proof. Not "let's discuss the pros and cons," but "make the country great." Torches of freedom. Assertion does not prove, it commands. The second tool, repetition. An idea repeated 1,000 times transforms from a hypothesis into an axiom. It burns a neural pathway in the collective consciousness, turning a path of doubt into a concrete highway from which there is no exit. And the third, most powerful catalyst, prestige. This is the almost mystical aura of power and success that surrounds a leader or an idea. Prestige paralyzes all criticism and inspires awe, like a savage before a fearsome deity. Assertion, repetition, prestige. This is the formula that turns words into a weapon of mass psychological destruction. Do you think these are just tricks for advertising? The full, blood-chilling power of this technology was revealed a few years later. In Adolf Hitler's personal library, among books on the occult, lay a well-read copy of Gustave Le Bon's work. Benito Mussolini publicly stated that he had read it more than once. They understood the main point. Assertion, their slogans about racial purity, crystallized to a primal simplicity. Repetition, the thunder of marching boots in endless parades, and the rasp of loudspeakers hammering those slogans into skulls. Prestige, the orchestrated cult of personality, the image of infallible leaders, the Führer, and Il Duce. A book by a French sociologist, written in the quiet of his study, became a practical guide for assembling the bloodiest totalitarian machines in history. It wasn't an analysis. It was the blueprint for an engine of suppression. And that engine, roaring, began to operate on the scale of entire continents. And here is the ultimate, almost diabolical secret to their effectiveness. All these tools, simple slogans, endless repetition, hypnotic authority, work flawlessly for one reason. They do not engage in a fair fight. They do not try to argue with your neocortex, with your logic, with your education. They appeal directly to the reptilian brain, to our limbic core. to the most ancient part responsible not for analysis, but for survival instincts, fear, aggression, and belonging to the pack. And it is there, into this defenseless, pre-logical zone of our consciousness, that we will now make our final dive. Imagine NASA's mission control room. Cool air. Absolute silence, broken only by the quiet hum of servers. Dozens of brilliant minds are bent over monitors. On giant screens, columns of flickering numbers, complex ballistic calculations, telemetry. A threat to the mission has arisen millions of miles from Earth. They are calm. They methodically analyze the data. Their collective mind, woven from centuries of scientific knowledge, operates like a single, hyper-precise neural processor. Now let's move these same people to the stands of a packed stadium. Suddenly, the deafening wail of a fire alarm sounds. Orange flames lick through the grating of the stands. The acrid smell of smoke. 10,000 bodies instantly become a single organism, vibrating with panic. Where are their differential equations now? Where is their logic? It's gone. There is only the hard pressure of other bodies, cold sweat on the back, and one desire stitched into their DNA: run, survive. Intellect is offline. Only instincts remain. This is the final, most fundamental law of Le Bon, mental regression. When you become part of a mass, a sharp, cognitive rollback occurs. Your prefrontal cortex, responsible for analysis, planning, and critical thinking, effectively reduces its activity. Control is seized by the amygdala, your almond-shaped body responsible for basic emotions and the fight-or-flight response. A crowd is as incapable of reasoning as a pack of wolves is of solving quadratic equations. It can only feel and act. You cannot prove a theorem to it, but you can show it an image of an enemy, and it will, without thinking, rush to destroy it. The entire complexity of the world is reduced to a primitive binary code, us or them, friend or foe, safe or dangerous. And here, with a deafening crack, your last and most cherished illusion shatters. The illusion that your IQ, your PhD, your extensive reading can serve as your armor. This is a fatal mistake. It is the key paradox Le Bon uncovered. A crowd is always intellectually inferior to the individual, even if it consists of Nobel laureates. Because the crowd mechanism doesn't engage you in an intellectual duel. It simply yanks the power cord from your processor. A professor of quantum physics, caught in the epicenter of a panic, will react on an instinctual level exactly the same as a person who has never read a book in their life, because the very neural circuit that makes him a professor is shut down. In a crowd, we are all equal in our primal animal vulnerability. So the blueprint is assembled. Before us is a detailed schematic of a hydraulic press for dismantling the personality. 6 interconnected laws. 6 steel gears that, meshing one with another, pull our consciousness inside and grind the unique I into a faceless, manageable we. We have seen how this machine starts, how it gains monstrous momentum, and what catastrophes its operation leads to. But the main existential question remains. Knowing how this machine is built, can one learn to eject from it in an emergency? Is it possible, once caught between its millstones, to preserve oneself? Let's look at the process as a whole. These are not 6 separate laws. It is a cascading effect, where one event triggers the next with a crash. It all begins with anonymity. It acts as an anesthetic for the conscience, granting an intoxicating sense of impunity and omnipotence. This, in turn, picks the locks and opens the floodgates for psychic contagion. Fear, anger, or euphoria spreads like an acoustic wave in a dense medium. On this wave of collective emotion, reason retreats, and you become hypnotically suggestible, ready to accept any command. And at this moment of absolute vulnerability, the leader steps onto the stage with his assertions sharp as a blade, and his hypnotic repetition. All of this works flawlessly because the crowd's brain has already regressed to a primitive state, incapable of criticism. These are the 6 sequential stages of the personality's absorption by the collective superorganism. Now let's return to you, to each of us in front of a flickering screen. Another digital fire is raging in your feed, another online witch hunt. The pixels are seething with fury. But now for you, it is not just the white noise of others' anger. You see the matrix. You discern the mechanics of the process. Here are the anonymous usernames absolving responsibility. Here is the emotional contagion through angry comments. Here are the opinion leaders throwing out assertions as simple as a punch. You physically feel the crowd's gravitational field begin to pull you in. You feel that hot, familiar wave rising inside you. The desire to join in, to condemn, to dissolve into that righteous we. But you pause, for just one deafening second. And then, with a distinct click that sounds like a gunshot in the quiet room, you slowly close the laptop lid. You stand up, and you walk outside under a real cool non-digital sky. This is your quiet, invisible rebellion, your personal escape from the crowd's matrix. And in this simple physical act lies the main, most unsettling conclusion of Le Bon's entire theory. We instinctively look for the enemy outside, manipulators, fanatics, fools, other people. But Le Bon's work, like a scalpel, dissects our psychology and reveals that the main adversary isn't outside, it's within. Inside each of us, beneath a thin layer of civilization and reason, slumbers this irrational primal force, the collective unconscious, the shadow. The crowd is not a forge that creates a beast within us. The crowd is a key that simply unlocks its cage. It gives permission for what already exists inside us. And that is why knowing these laws is not a weapon for fighting others. It is a mirror for controlling ourselves. Finally, a question for you personally. Gustave Le Bon died in 1931. He never knew television or the internet, yet his laws have proven to be frighteningly prophetic. Think about your own experience. In which environment have you most often felt this gravitational pull, this invisible magic of the crowd in real physical life, at roaring stadiums, in marching columns, at euphoric concerts, or in the digital space, where crowds gather and attack with fury in mere seconds? Write a single word in the comments that reflects your primary experience, offline or online. And if you wish, share your story. It will help all of us better understand where the soul of the crowd lives today.